Liv Holmfjord is the head of the Norwegian Directorate of Fisheries. Whilst in Norway, we were given information that not only is she in charge of regulating the country's fish farm industry, but also owns shares in one of Norway's largest fish farm companies. Many conservation groups feel this is a great conflict of interests. Holmfjord has agreed to meet Tarin to answer questions about the state of Norway's fish farms.
Well, fish farming is quite a new industry in Norway. It started back in the 1960s with some local entrepreneurs starting with hobby, and it's grown until it's a billion-euro industry today. And seafood is the second largest export industry in Norway, and fish farming accounts for 2/3 of the export value of seafood.
So recently, we found out that you also have shares in one of the largest fish farm companies in Norway. Do you not feel that that's a conflict of interest?
Of course, there could be a conflict of interest, but this is a fact that's been known since before I got this position, and I've been open about it. I'm not involved in the business from day to day or at any. So it's, and if there's, we have, and I have. Sorry, do you have to start over again? Hva heter det for noe da? So all the decisions that I made will either be for the whole industry, not especially for this fish farm, or it's only an advice to the politicians, and the politicians are setting the limits and the actual regulations. So if there's an actual case handling regarding this company, then I will step aside.
When on a few jobs I was working here over the years as a diver, we used to go around the fish farms cleaning the dead, deceased fish from the nets and fixing the nets, etc. after storms. And on occasion we'd seen some of the boats coming in to clean the lice off them. It's quite a lot of dead fish, you know, diseased or they've died, but it's a lot of pink mush, you know, not healthy look. Having seen what I've seen and worked on the various sites round about where I've been in Scotland, I wouldn't eat farmed salmon. No, I would have. pretty rank.
Salmon is marketed as healthy. It's also marketed in a very devious way, deceptive way, that they think it's a wild product. So it's a fake product, it's a fatty product, it's contaminated, it's marketed as healthy, but it's not. So salmon, if you see salmon, alarm bells should start ringing.
It's pretty grim when you dive down to the bottom of the cages because, you know, we always see the bottom full of dead fish. And it's basically because many of these fish are so diseased, so parasite-ridden and laden with chemicals that they become sick and they live out their sad, short lives, basically looking like zombies. You know, you don't see this when you go to the restaurant or the supermarket, but this is basically what a lot of the fish actually look like before it ends up on our plates. So tonight, Don wanted to show us how much of the farmed fish actually dies because of the very unnatural and unsanitary ways that they are kept. And they have rows of very large metal containers that they are constantly filling up with the dead fish. And I have to say that the smell as we get closer is actually pretty disgusting.
So this is the sordid side of salmon farming in Scotland. This is the dirty secrets the industry don't want you to see. This is disease-ridden farmed salmon. It's 15 to 20% fat. That's where the contaminants, the cancer-causing contaminants, PCBs, dioxins, and the artificial colorings are. So this is something to be avoided at all costs.
This is the salmon farm just here. We got freedom of information, data from the Scottish Environment Protection Agency showing the use of over 50 tons of formaldehyde, not just at this site but other sites across Scotland. Is formaldehyde may cause cancer, suspected of causing genetic defects, toxic if swallowed, may cause respiratory irritation, causes damage to organs. Do not breathe.
One of the fish farm workers told us that the workers come down to the farm early in the morning, spraying the chemicals into the fish cages. So they're obviously spraying something down there in the water. The guy who gave us the tip-off said that toxic chemicals are widely used across Scotland, including formaldehyde and also hydrogen peroxide. And these are supposed to treat the diseases and lice problems which are both rampant across the fish farms. You know, these are not chemicals that you want in your body. Whatever he's spraying must be pretty powerful if he needs to wear full protective chemical suit and a face mask.
As the ocean becomes a dumping ground of 7 billion people and farms saturate their fish with chemical feed, eating fish has never been so toxic.
You know, our oceans have become humanity's sewers. Everything eventually flows into the sea. So if you had a, time machine that could go back before the Industrial Revolution, it's a different story. But now, the highest levels of many of these persistent organic pollutants, we're talking about, DDT and PCBs and dioxins, the highest levels in our food supply are found in the aquatic food chain. Fish are not the safest choice anymore.
So Tony, it's great to see you.
Great to see you as well. Thanks for coming.
Not at all. Thank you. A pleasure being here. So I wanted to ask you if you could share with us what exactly it was you began to feel when you realized something was going wrong.
I was exhausted more than usual, and then I was losing short-term memory, and that scared the hell out of me. And then I tore my rotator cuffs in a really intense snowboarding accident. And the doctor said, "Do you want to do your metals test?" And I said, I got my amalgams out 25 years ago. He goes, "There's so many metals in the environment, you should do it." So I did. I get a phone call a week later, and I said to my assistant, "Just have him send the report." And he said, "No, it's an emergency. He has to speak to you." And it's like, no one wants to hear that. And so I called him up, and he said, "Tony, I showed your blood tests. You have extreme mercury poisoning. On a 0 to 5 scale, which is what we measure, 5 being toxic, you're 123. The doctor said, how long has this man been in the hospital?" And I just got off stage. So I said, I can't understand this. So I went out, and they thought, maybe someone was trying to poison me because the number was so high. And I was very disciplined. I was a vegan for 12 years, and then I just went salad fish. And they brought the medical group out here, and they looked at it, and I found this man named Dr. Shade, who's the only guy who has an ideation process where you can see where the mercury came from, and it was fish. Mm-hmm. It's been 3 years, and I had some severe moments. It burned a hole in my esophagus, and I literally collapsed. I lost a third of my blood supply. I could have died. I lost half my hemoglobin.
People begin to lose their hair, their memory. They lose their memories, as you were doing, as you noticed. But they can also have headaches. They can complain of fatigue. They can also have depression. What we're seeing now is with the toxic environmental exposure, and especially with the methyl mercury in fish, is that everyone has got to be careful because the levels are going up.
Udo, tell me, because your specialty is in this, how do you get the fish oils that we all need for the brain and for the body if we can't have fish? What do you suggest?
Well, we used to get them from fish oils.
Yes.
But we can actually get them from vegetables. Flax is the richest source of omega-3 that everybody thinks should come from fish oil. If you get enough of that as starting material, your body will make what the fish oils make, and it'll be clean.
Many people take fish oils or have fish for the long-chain omega-3 fatty acids. And you have to ask yourself the question, well, where do the fish get them from? And it turns out they get them from the algae in the ocean. They get them from plant food. So if you want the purest form of the long-chain, ready-made omega-3 fatty acids, the best way of doing that is simply to take an algae supplement, because then you've got the purest form of it and you don't have the extra risks of having the toxins and the heavy metals and the saturated fat and the cholesterol that you would get from eating a fish.
A peer-reviewed study from researchers at Scripps Institution of Oceanography at UC San Diego undertook one of the largest studies of fish pollutants in the world. The scientists found toxic contaminants in fish right across the planet's oceans.
Nobody would go to the nearest body of water and put in like a cup and drink the water. You're basically getting the concentrated toxins if we're eating fish.
Our oceans have also become filled with plastic. As the oceans are so large, it is a challenge for any scientist to accurately understand where most of this plastic is coming from. The Great Pacific Garbage Patch, covering an area of about 1.6 million square kilometers, may provide a unique opportunity to better understand the growing problem of microplastics in the sea. A team of scientists from the organization Ocean Cleanup have been studying the patch for some time and were surprised when they discovered that the vast majority of plastic in the patch is not from old drinking straws or used plastic water bottles, but from thousands of tons of discarded fishing gear broken down by the sea into trillions of pieces of microplastic. A study recently published in the journal Nature found that about 80% of the plastic in the Pacific is made up of discarded fishing gear. Many scientists agree that one of the greatest things we as individuals can do to solve this problem of a plastic ocean is to move away from eating fish and switch to a plant-based diet.
At least half of the plastic in the sea today comes from discarded or lost fishing gear. Because all those nets, all those lines, all that stuff, it's just become a plasticized ocean. But we have a chance. We have a chance right now to change our eating habits.
There's an estimate that there's over 5 trillion tons of plastic currently floating in the ocean. It's absolutely everywhere. Everywhere we look, we found microplastics, whether it's at the polar regions, in remote islands. Also, if we're looking on the surface or the seabed, and everywhere in between, we find microplastics. We've also found microplastics in just about every animal group that we've looked in. We've been sampling for microplastics for quite a while now, and we found that there's 27 times more bits of plastic than there are fish larvae.
Microplankton are found throughout the oceans. They are filter feeders. When the researchers add microplastics into the plankton's environment, they consistently observe them ingesting the plastic particles. Unaware that the tiny particles are made up of toxic chemicals, the plankton consume them indiscriminately. The researchers observe how the chemicals accumulate within the organs of these small marine creatures. The toxic plankton are then eaten by larger fish, and researchers have found that much of the fish that we are eating today has bioaccumulated these chemicals within their flesh. A study by the University of Plymouth found that over a third of all the fish tested contained microplastics. As we eat these contaminated fish, we ingest the same toxic chemicals into our bodies, and recent research suggests similar toxic accumulation in humans.
Our scientists tell us we're now in the 6th extinction event of life on this Earth. It doesn't even make the headlines. No one even knows about it.
Saya kesemua walaupun ni mati kana, hati mereka ni mati kana. Nani ke? Yo alo siapa ni te? Sia ayu temene kati sebenarnya. Tony na waku ke ban. Thera ate nekuni. Saya tidak di saya metani saya nunu ada yang nunu ni, saya potongnya nunu. Saya rasa timurko, ayu romera. Saya nak bekas nak henikan haka, ada di tali haba. Nekuni saya kepu pasti dihaga. Saya lah yang nilai kena nilai nilai kapan. Tahu apa ni ti? Tuara di muka nyalo wana kapan. Naik kepu ni kira. Tuara ni kalau ni nyasa dia ni. Tahu apa ni? Ikan oleh. Na, waikna, oti peti apa ni?
We've had 5 mass extinction events on this planet in 450 million years. Let me be clear on this. The last time we had an extinction event of this magnitude was 65 million years ago.
It's incredibly sad to realize just how many species, both in the oceans and on land, that we're losing at the moment. And it's up to all of us to make sure that this doesn't happen in the future.
Today, over 26,000 species are currently threatened with extinction, and the most important driver of that is our use of land for agriculture.
Over time, livestock have been a major driver of biodiversity loss.
Some have predicted that by 2045, the species loss will be so great that we won't recover. The Earth will suffer ecological collapse. And the biggest thing you and I can do is change our diet.
Some scientists have begun to call this current crisis a biological annihilation. According to the journal Science of the Total Environment from Florida International University, livestock farming is the leading cause of biodiversity loss. According to a study published in the journal Science, if the entire world were to switch to an exclusively plant-based diet, we would free up over 75% of the world's arable land, and many of the forests previously cut down for livestock farming could be restored. There are now many great initiatives around the world doing just that. Ecosia, an online search engine similar to Google, is one such initiative that uses the revenue made from advertising to pay local communities to replant trees. One of Ecosia's main foresters is Mauricio, who has been working hard to replant the rainforest in Brazil.
Plantei minha primeira árvore, eu tinha 5 anos de idade. Eu nem imaginava que 20 anos depois, esse esforço tão pequeno teria virado uma das iniciativas que mais plantou árvores na história do Brasil. Foram mais de 2,5 milhões de árvores, 2.000 hectares plantados, muitas áreas preservadas pela ação de combate a incêndios florestais.
Trees breathe life into our world. When we plant a tree, we sow the very seeds of our future on this planet. The most recent in-depth study into the environmental impact of what we eat was a peer-reviewed journal by an international team of researchers. This landmark study, headed by Dr. Marco Springman of Oxford University in England, found that in order to have any chance of keeping temperatures below the dangerous 2 degrees Celsius threshold set out in the Paris Climate Agreement, in high-income countries we need to drastically reduce our consumption of meat by around 80%.
Policymakers have been very, very reluctant to address the livestock issue. It's entirely out of keeping with the urgency of the crisis that we're facing.
Hi, Otto Brockway for Brockstar Films. This is a question for Commissioner Hogan. The scientists at Oxford University have been very clear that livestock farming has a far greater impact than plant-based farming. With this in mind, would it not be common sense to reduce the billions in subsidy payments to livestock farming in Europe and offer them to plant-based farming instead as an incentive to a much more sustainable food system?
We have made our proposals based on protecting the farmers because they are, unlike you and I, they're out in all sorts of weathers and in all sorts of market risks. And you and I may not know anything about that because this is their lives. They're producing high quality food for us all so that we can have this particular good quality products available to us at all times. Sometimes under local conditions like organic, more times it's conventional farming. So we provide financial support at the moment for that. And it's a public good that's not always recognised. But the movement of our policy is in the direction of our farmers being centrally involved in providing more public goods. And if you want to do anything in life, you have to pay people. Sometimes I understand that there's a moral obligation and there's people of principle, but most of the time, 99% of the time, they have to get paid. So as professionals that we're expecting to provide good quality food and do more on public goods, we pay our farmers. This is a decision that we make at political level.
Livestock emit methane and nitrous oxide. Now, most people, when they think of climate change, they think of CO2, carbon dioxide, which is a very potent global warming gas. But methane is 25 times more potent per molecule when it's released than CO2. And nitrous oxide is 298 times more potent per molecule than CO2. These are very powerful global warming gases.
So today we have a very special camera called a hyperspectral imaging camera, and it basically enables us to be able to see gases that would be otherwise invisible to the naked eye. And today we're looking at methane gas. Methane is a gas that is being produced by cows when they belch.
Methane, together with the other gases it produces in the atmosphere, has caused a third of global warming since 1750. Livestock are the largest source of methane that we can control. Steep cuts in methane emissions can slow global warming by 15 to 25 years, making it the most effective means we have to slow warming in the critical years ahead.
Whoa, look at that. Wow.
To demonstrate the different heating potentials of climate gases, we can look to an experiment known as the infrared absorption experiment. Here, we see 4 Earth-shaped ice statues, each one in its own airtight chamber. The chambers represent the atmosphere surrounding the planet. Each has an infrared heater placed above it, set at identical temperatures, and each one is then filled with a different gas. The first chamber is filled with normal air that we breathe from day to day. The second chamber is filled with carbon dioxide, a well-known climate-warming gas. The third chamber is filled with methane, a gas associated with animal agriculture, and the fourth chamber is filled with nitrous oxide, also a gas associated with animal agriculture. Over time, we begin to see the ice statue in the carbon dioxide chamber slightly melting compared with the normal air. But in the same short time, the statues in the methane and nitrous oxide chambers begin to melt rapidly as the temperature inside rises considerably higher than both the normal air and also the carbon dioxide. 16 hours later, the results are stark. We can clearly see that the methane and nitrous oxide, the 2 main gas byproducts of animal agriculture, are potent climate-warming gases. Of the estimated 70 billion land animals reared for human consumption each year around the world, nearly 90% are chickens. An emerging problem is that chicken consumption is now on the rise. Whilst chicken has a lower environmental impact than red meat, over 90% of chicken globally is now intensively farmed, and this is having devastating effects on our planet. If we compare the equivalent protein calories for meat and plant-based proteins, such as chickpeas, chicken does less harm to the environment than commonly consumed red meats, and yet still causes 40 times more climate-related warming per calorie of protein than chickpeas, and uses 50 times the amount of water.
We know that if we would shift from ruminant meats to other meats, then we probably would reduce our footprint just from that particular product by about a factor of 10, which is quite a bit. But if you compare that with how much you would reduce your footprint if you went to plant-based products, that is about a factor of 100. And that's the reason why shifting towards more plant-based diets has such a big impact, because we're really talking about different scales here.
Organic meat has been claimed to have less environmental and climate impact. However, a study carried out by researchers at Oxford University found that, in fact, organic or conventionally produced meat has little significant difference in greenhouse emissions.
So in our data, we didn't find big differences between organic and conventional across multiple indicators. What we did find is that no matter how you produce animal products, even the lowest impact forms of production still create higher emissions and use more land than typical vegetable proteins. So that's saying something really important. That's saying that even if you go into the shops and try and purchase sustainable meat or dairy, it's always going to be better to purchase vegetable proteins instead.
Each year, the US government gives around $20 million to subsidize fruit and vegetable farming. But meat and dairy farming get a massive $38 billion from the government. It is now estimated that the annual cost to the US taxpayer of diseases related to meat and dairy consumption are now around $314 billion.
And when you cram, tens of thousands of animals in these cramped, filthy, unhygienic conditions, basically live atop their feces, it's just like a breeding ground. Animal to human diseases that arise because of the way we're now treating animals, whether it's these live animal markets in East Asia, whether it's the bushmeat trade. And the concern is that with enough spins at genetic roulette on these swine factory farms, these chicken factory farms, we're gonna, end up with one of these viruses that's not only deadly to chickens, but can jump and transmit human to human and cause the next human pandemic.
The risk of large-scale factory farmings increases the risk or the likelihood that we might have a pandemic, particularly of influenza in the future.
This pandemic has been very severe, but this is not necessarily the big one.
Swine flu, which killed over 500,000 people, is believed to have originated in pig farming. AIDS and the Ebola virus are believed to have come from eating wild animals, while MERS from camels, and also camel's milk and meat. SARS is thought to have spread from live animal wet markets, as was the recent COVID-19 pandemic. Bird flu is believed to have come from chicken farms and also live animal wet markets. And the measles virus is thought to have originated from farm cows.
People know now what a global pandemic feels like. They've seen the effects. They will be feeling the effects for many years to come. And that this is a chance, I think, an opportunity to point out that this particular route of infection is a very concerning one.
The World Health Organization has announced that the post-antibiotic era is near. A time where a simple scrape on the arm could become fatal. Our miracle life-saving antibiotics are being rendered useless due to overuse. Not because of overuse by humans, but because we give them each day to billions of farm animals.
Having been a butcher for 6 years, one thing I know is that if people knew what happened in the production of their food, they wouldn't eat meat. So one of the things that we would hit every day was pus nodules, tumours, cysts. It was something that we would hit on a daily basis. Having worked in a supermarket chain, I saw this firsthand every single day. So here's one that's running along the shoulder blade. Oh, yeah. That is what I remember in the butchery. It comes out like a thick toothpaste. I remember that every single day.
That's interesting to hear you had that experience all the way over there, because in the UK, exactly the same.
Yeah.
We would see that on a daily basis. But those people who say it's not my butcher does this, they need to open their eyes, because if their butcher's being honest with them, we know. Yeah. We both know. And any honest butcher's going to admit it. They're not going to want to tell the public because it's going to affect their business. But it is a fact.
And me working in multiple butcheries, I saw these common trends across the board. So I know that it wasn't just isolated to the one that I was working in. It was across the board for me.
People need to reconnect with what they're eating, and the whole process that we're talking about here of how that food gets to them is hidden from them, and it's hidden for a reason. Because if they saw it, it would most definitely make them want to think harder about what they're eating.